I happened by chance to be in Washington when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. I was there for a meeting evaluating biomedical research proposals at the National Institutes of Health and a visit from Stanford. But it made it terribly vivid about the danger. And from then on, I was to some degree obsessed with trying to understand what was the nature of the danger. Was it even greater than we knew, as it turned out to be? As you know, that was part of Carnegie's program to clarify. But I made it my business over the succeeding years, after 1962, when the missile crisis occurred, to get in touch with scholars like Alexander George at Stanford and Graham Allison at Harvard and Ole Holstey at Duke, people who'd studied various crises, including the Cuban Missile Crisis, and try to understand both the nature of that crisis and then what could be done to, first, to manage similar crises should they occur in the future, and then when we realized the enormous difficulty of that, to move on to crisis prevention. How could we avoid a recurrence of a crisis like the Cuban Missile Crisis, even if we still had enormous piles of nuclear weapons, even if there was still great animosity between us and the Soviets? Couldn't we learn it was in our own national interest, we and the Soviets, to keep back a few steps from the precipice of a nuclear confrontation, which probably could not be managed again? So that was an important theme, an important stimulus, and it led, of course, to direct contact with some Soviet scholars and scientists, and led also to an interest in arms control as well as crisis prevention. So there were a number of years in which that stimulus sort of embedded into the prior interest in human stress, which, of course, a quintessential example was the leaders in a nuclear confrontation. What could be more stressful than that?